and therefore has to engage in cooperation and coordination with various organizations present at the regional level, in Africa, for example, or at the international level, IMO or ISA, to manage these activities. And also has been doing so these past years by signing memorandum of understandings with this organization and by organizing many informal meetings with them as well. But now I would like to highlight some of the major challenges that this region is currently facing. First, the OSPAR network of marine protected areas is not ecologically coherent yet. There is a need to designate more LPAs in some areas which are not covered. In addition, cooperation with all these international organizations for the management of these LPAs remains difficult. It is only done in the form of informal meetings and instruments. And there is a need to go through those organization processes to adopt complementary measures to protect these areas. And last but not least, the marine protected areas and their management plan are not yet binding for some parties. They are only binding for the OSPAR contracted parties. The second region I would like to discuss is the Southern Ocean, which as the North Atlantic has a rather unique framework, which is the Antarctic Treaty System. And as all of you know, within the Antarctic Treaty System, all territorial claims in the Antarctic continent have been freezed, and therefore all waters surrounding the Antarctic continent are considered as being ice. Now within this system has been established a convention for the conservation of Antarctic marine living resources, which was the first instruments to integrate the ecosystem approach within its functioning. And the Canada, in 2009, designated its first marine protected areas in the ICs in the South Orkney Islands, Southern Shelf, and in 2011 went further and adopted a general framework measure for the establishment of Canada MPAs. Now, next month, Canada will also look at additional proposals to designate MPAs in the Ross Sea and East Antarctica. But again, if we look at the major challenges that this region is facing, we see that they are very similar to the one made by OSPAR contracting parties in the Northeast Atlantic, as the network of Canada MPAs is not representative yet, and that Canada only regulates activities linked to fishing and therefore needs to cooperate with other international organizations if it wants to regulate more human activities within its marine protected areas. And in addition, as within the Northeast Atlantic framework, the third conflict issue is not solved. Now I would like also to highlight what is going on in the Sargasso Sea. And the Sargasso Sea, compared to the two first regions, is not so unique, because it does not benefit from a dedicated regional fisheries management organization or regional seas convention. The only regional organization which is competent in the region is not that regional, it's the International Convention for the Conservation of Atlantic Tuna. And there are as well a few global organizations which are competent, IMO, ISA, the CBD, or the IWC. Now, to face the situation, the Sargasso Sea Alliance has been formed, which is a partnership which is led by the government of Bermuda in collaboration with many other partners, and which aims to secure protection for the Sargasso Sea using existing organizations to adopt this protective measure. For example, the Sargasso Sea has been submitted as an ecologically or biologically significant areas to the sea, and are also studying the possibility to go to the IMO to adopt additional protective measures from the threats linked to shipping. But there are several lessons that can be learned from the Sargasso Sea experience, which is really much more representative of what's going on right now in the ocean than the Northeast Atlantic and the Canada. It shows that even in this case, there are several actions which can be undertaken, such as the identification of excess, the adoption of protective measures by global organizations. But there are several issues as well which remain. The third state issue, the difficulty to achieve cooperation within all these regional organizations, the need to have a champion state to make proposals in international organizations, and the lack of regulation of all human activities. And this is true as well in two other regions that we have studied, which are the Southwest Pacific and the Western Indian Ocean, which are really representative of what's going on right now. Because as you can see, there is currently no regional framework which is really in place or effective enough to ensure the protection of marine biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction. And we have looked at how to ensure protection in these areas. And listed several options, such as expanding the mandate of existing regional CIS convention, using existing alliances and partnerships, or seize the opportunity of the entry into force of new regional fisheries management organizations in these regions to raise awareness and development treatment of these issues. Now I would like to highlight some of the lessons that we have learned when we are conducting this study. The first one is that you need to identify a champion or leading organization in each region if you wish to enhance the protection of marine biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction. The OSPAR in the Northeast Atlantic has played this role, as well as the Cameron in the Southern Ocean and the Sargasso Sea Alliance in the Sargasso Sea. But at the same time, you cannot just simply extend the mandate of this convention. You also need to reinforce the framework for actions through funding or capacity building, for example, and to take into account regional characteristics. Now, in all the frameworks that we have studied, cooperation and coordination is a critical issue. Cooperation and coordination between regional organizations themselves, and this one once again raises the question of whether there is a need to merge into one single instrument. The competence of regional fisheries management organization and of regional CIS convention facilitate the processes to help to speed up the processes. And cooperation and coordination with global organizations is also a very critical issue in all this framework. And this highlights clearly the need for an implementing agreement which would give a mandate, an explicit mandate to this organization to cooperate for the protection of marine biodiversity at the regional level. And the last issue is the third and free rider status issue, which cannot be solved at the regional level. And for that as well, we need an implementing agreement to enclose the subject. So the conclusion to our study is that the regional level is inherently complementary to the global level. But so how does this work in practice? How do you articulate it to systems? And I would like to conclude by showing you the slide that some of you may already know, which is a scenario which has been developed in the context of the seminar that we organized and where we asked experts, ocean governance experts, to try to imagine in a very legally coherent way what could the future of marine protected areas in areas of national jurisdiction could look like. And as you can see here, an implementing agreement to enclose is adopted. And this agreement foresees that marine protected areas are identified and designated and managed at the regional level. And then included in an international list managed by a governing body in charge of the implementation of the agreement, which makes them legally binding for all contracting parties to this implementing agreement. And with this bit of perspective about the future, I will conclude and thank you all for your attention.
Prior to joining the PU in 2009, she was director of the species program of WWF International based in New York. She led all programmatic, scientific, and communications aspects of work on endangered and threatened species at the global level, as well as all international policy issues pertaining to species conservation. Susan, you have this.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you. It's a late evening, and you're staring at the wine there. You're thinking, I have to sit through another talk. So I'm going to try to keep you awake, try to make it interesting, try not to talk too long, as challenging as that is for me. Just to recap a couple of things, not going to talk in great detail, but I think we know that the ocean in many ways has reached a tipping point. Fisheries are not the only threat, nor are all fish species overfished. I want to give that impression, but there are some serious problems. There are too many boats going after too few fish. And these are old data, so I know that this has not been updated with the 2012 data, just to keep you awake, see if you can tell where there's changes. But the bottom line is the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, State of World Fisheries and Aquaculture, the situation has not improved. Today, the combined fully exploited, overexploited, depleted, or recovering from depletion fisheries is 87%. I'm not saying that it's all overexploited, not at all. But over half the fish stocks are fully exploited with no room for further expansion. Something needs to happen. In addition to the fisheries issues, we talk about how much of the ocean is protected. In terms of marine protected areas, it's almost impossible to find the parts of the ocean that are protected, yet the global community, not just in Rio in '92, not just in Johannesburg, also at the CBD, Convention on Biological Diversity, and also at Rio a couple months ago, has agreed to protect 10% of the ocean. It's not physically or chronologically possible to protect 50% of the ocean without including the high seas. There's just not enough within the EEZs, the exclusive economic zones of countries, to do that. We have to have high seas protected areas if the world is to meet that target, but also if there is to be a healthy ocean into the future. So what needs to happen to conserve high seas biodiversity? And I want to stress a point that Christina made, that if you look at the law of the sea 30 years ago, the word biodiversity doesn't exist there. A few of you in this room may not have even been born then and wondered, what do you mean we didn't talk about biodiversity? It wasn't seen, it wasn't understood, and it was thought there's no way anyhow we could ever overexploit on the high seas and ever deplete species on the high seas. This was not technologically possible. Well, it is. And what needs to happen to conserve high seas biodiversity? Marine protected areas, and particularly reserves, have to be established on the high seas. Just as in terrestrial ecosystems, if some areas are to be used, if some areas are to be used for sustainable development or even urbanization, it's absolutely critical as well to set aside some areas as wilderness, as national parks, as a reservoir for biodiversity. And in order to do that on the high seas, there needs to be a legal framework to do that. Within countries, a country wants to establish a park or reserve, anything, you have a legal framework, it's the country, it's the laws of the country. That needs to happen for the high seas as well. Also on the high seas, to conserve biodiversity, there needs to be some way of requiring prior environmental impact assessments for all the human activities that are going on. And there also needs to be monitoring, control, and surveillance of vessels on the high seas. And this is just a quick summary. I could talk an hour on each of them, don't worry, I won't. Now, there are a number of existing legal frameworks for the high seas, and I don't want to give the impression, I don't think any of us do, that there's no instruments out there. There are instruments. As Christina mentioned, we have the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Almost everyone is a party. We're hoping that everyone else becomes a party very soon. But that is the constitution for the ocean. There are also regional fishery management organizations and regional seas conventions, all of which have different mandates and incomplete coverage. We're not saying that things that are from regional fishery management organizations aren't effectively managing the species that they're responsible for. Some are doing a good job, some could do a whole lot better. But they're only involved a subset of fishing countries or coastal states, and they only involve certain species or certain fisheries. There's also the International Seabed Authority, which is limited to the area, the seabed. There's the International Maritime Organization, very important, with a very sectoral approach and a narrow mandate. And the Convention on Biological Diversity, with a great process now for ecologically or biologically significant areas. But the Convention on Biological Diversity can't establish protected areas. The Convention and its parties and its scientists can say, these places are really important ecologically, you need to protect them. But who's going to do that protection? Where's that going to happen? And that has to be because it's the high seas. It doesn't belong to any one country. It belongs to everyone or no one. I prefer to think the everyone part, but anyhow. But who's going to do that? And that has to be at the UN level, because that's all we have. In terms of ocean governance, I mentioned the RFMO, CBD, etc. Again, some of them are doing a good job, some could be doing a better job, but the only place to really properly deal with the high seas themselves, the areas beyond national jurisdiction is at the UN level. The UN every year gets together and negotiates, as the governments negotiate, a resolution on sustainable fisheries. Making good progress. Not solving all the problems, but making good progress. Every year there's an oceans resolution, the oceans omnibus resolution, under the law of the sea with some important decisions, and we believe an opportunity to move this issue further and more quickly. There's also, as Christina mentioned, a working group on biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction. That's the short name. And it's called BBOJ because that's even shorter. And there's also, I won't go into everything, but the informal consultative process on the law of the sea. These are processes going on at the United Nations, UN General Assembly. They're all very important. But I want to stress that the current high seas governance has major gaps because of the sectoral. Again, there is no mechanism for multi-sectoral marine protected areas, including reserves, no mechanism to coordinate environmental impact, and no mechanism to manage the impacts across sectors. What's needed is, we believe, and that's, I don't mean we, the Pew Environment Group, I actually mean the more than 25 organizations in the High Seas Alliance, that what's needed, not because we're really looking forward to negotiating a new treaty, but what's needed is a new legal framework and implementing an agreement under the law of the sea. The law of the sea didn't deal with this issue because in the 70s when it was negotiated, it really wasn't understood that it was necessary, nor, as Sylvia said, we have the science and the knowledge of what there is there.